Hello and welcome to the June 2021 AWS Tech Talk focused on broadband and CPE devices and how AWS can help customers easily and securely integrate CPE device fleets with the AWS cloud. We have great content ready to share with you today, and we look forward to fielding any questions you have at the end of the session. We'll begin with a few quick introductions. First, my name is Lowry Snow. I'm on the worldwide IoT business development team, and I look after the smart home vertical, which also includes service providers and CPE devices. I'll be joined today by David Malone, Senior IoT Solution Architect, who will cover some of the technical aspects of the topics we'll be discussing today. And later, Alina Dima, Senior IoT Consultant from the AWS Europe team, will join to give an overview of the AWS offering focused on broadband and CPE devices. And finally, we are especially pleased to welcome a guest contributor for today's Tech Talk. Michael Philpott joins us from the technology research and consulting firm Omdia, where Michael is research director covering the service provider consumer space. Michael has 25 years of experience in the telecommunications and digital media markets. He is now Omdia's leading analyst in the connected home space, including smart Wi-Fi and broadband access strategy. Before joining Omdia, Michael worked at BT's Research and Development Lab, designing next-generation XDSL and fiber optic access networks. With his background in the industry, Michael will be sharing highlights of his research covering telco and the connected home. And with that, let's jump right to it. During the first half of the Tech Talk session today, Michael will walk through some of the research he's done related to the role of telcos in the smart home. And for the second half of the session, we'll outline what we call the AWS Broadband Freedom Initiative and how we can help you get started with the initiative. At the end of the session, we've reserved time to field any questions from those of you that are listening live today. And with that, we'll turn the time over to Michael to share his telco and connected home research with us. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. My presentation today is on the future of the telco connected home. And as Larry was explaining, this is really a summary of all the research that Omdia has done in the connected home space over the last few years, including a large service provider survey that we've done in conjunction with the Broadband Forum. Ever since broadband services were first launched, broadband service providers are focused around two things. One is speed and the other is price. And what this has led to is an exponential growth in broadband speeds, whereas prices remain relatively flat, so that service providers always remain competitive. The issue with that is that as broadband speeds, especially ultra-fast broadband speeds, become more prevalent in the market, then the marketing shine around speed alone starts to diminish, because consumers, once they get speeds of say 300 megabits per second, don't really see the benefit of just getting more speed alone, and they would really benefit from other things such as 100% reliability and consistency, for example. So what we're seeing is service providers moving away from just differentiating around speed to this concept of differentiating around the whole quality experience of the service. But that's much harder to quantify. So what does quality experience mean? Well, if you look at what consumers value, and this is taken from Omdia's Consumer Insight Survey, what they really value is, yes, they do value speed, but also, and increasingly so, they want 100% reliability and also consistency. Then they like great customer service, because this broadband service has now become so important to us that when things go wrong, we want that thing fixed as soon as possible. And we also like having great Wi-Fi experience in every room, because we don't just access the internet from one device anymore. We want to get access to that high speeds wherever we are in the home. And then finally, we want high quality applications and features that wrap around that service and really provide a new experience around that broadband service. And I would argue that none of this is possible without first managing the connected home. The issue with that is that, at least traditionally, service providers didn't really see the connected home as something that they should invest in. In fact, they really saw it just as a cost burden on their business. And therefore, their strategy when it came to the connected home was really just to get things as cheap as possible. What that meant over time is that as they invested more in their core network and their access networks, it kind of pushed what we call a broadband bottleneck further into the home, therefore increasing customer frustration around that part of the network. As part of that survey I mentioned earlier, we asked service providers what the most common causes of user support calls are. And you can see from the chart that number one was slow broadband speed, then followed by Wi-Fi device configuration and setup, and then things like broadband latency and jitter, outages, service setup, etc. Poor Wi-Fi performance actually came kind of in the middle of the chart. But actually, when we talk to the actual service agents working in those businesses, what we found is that increasingly, more often than not, it's the Wi-Fi part of the network that's causing these issues. In fact, in Omdia's research, we found that up to 60% of all broadband calls going into those service agents are related to Wi-Fi. And these calls tend to be expensive because service providers haven't invested in that part of the network. Those service agents are kind of flying blind. They've got no idea what's going on in the home. So they tend to take a long time to resolve. It often also results in multiple calls because those service agents kind of defer to a kind of trial and error type basis. You know, try do this, and if that doesn't work, then call us back. And what they're trying to really avoid is an unsolved problem, because they know that an unsolved problem really does hit their customer satisfaction scores. So what often they'll do to rectify that as a last resort, if you like, is they'll often say, okay, we can't solve it any other way, so what we'll do is we'll ship you some new equipment. And what we found talking to vendors of the service providers is that up to 85% of those routers returned, there's actually nothing wrong with them at all. It's something else that was impacting that service at the time. And perhaps the most damning statistic of all is that on average, about 65% of customers won't actually complain to their service providers because they either know that they won't or that they can't help them with their issue. So what they'll do is that they'll wait for that contract to end, and then they'll churn to a different service provider in the hope that they get some new equipment and that will solve the issue for them. So not only is this lack of investment now hurting their operational costs, but it's also driving increasingly customer churn as well. All of this meant that service providers now take a different attitude to their connected home and really started to invest once more in it. Early initiatives around this, though, was really just to provide additional Wi-Fi equipment, mainly in the guise of Wi-Fi extenders. But how do you do that? What's the go-to-market strategy providing this new equipment? Do you just wait for customers to complain and then offer them some Wi-Fi extenders? Do you offer them to all your customers on your footprint? Or perhaps do you just offer them to the premium customers? And I've certainly seen all these models being adopted. But the issue with them all is that none of them are really that effective or efficient. The data we're showing on the screen here is real life customer data. It comes from a quality of experience Wi-Fi vendor called Domus. And it's showing a sample of 30,000 end users and the Wi-Fi issues that they're facing. You can see on the left of the chart, about 40% of those customers are suffering with Wi-Fi issue around coverage. So yes, they may benefit from being supplied an extender. But you can see 60% of customers on the right are not actually suffering from coverage at all. They're actually suffering from interference type issues. And actually supplying those customers with just Wi-Fi extenders wouldn't help them with that issue at all. In fact, it actually might just make things worse, because the more access points you pump into the network, the greater the interference can become. So just shipping all these devices to those customers would just not only be efficient, but actually might be making things worse for many of those customers. So how do you do this efficiently if you don't know what issues your customers are facing? And therefore, we moved to a smarter way, really, of deploying Wi-Fi into the home using AI data analytic platforms and something that I call smart Wi-Fi. And what I mean by smart Wi-Fi is putting this software layer over the top of the Wi-Fi router and those extenders and mesh extenders, etc., as well where necessary. And what this software enables is a much more dynamic experience in the home, because the software is able to monitor what's going in the home and dynamically change the settings directly in that hardware to always make sure that it's providing the best quality of service that it possibly can. All that data now becomes available to those support teams, so they can actively also monitor all the customers on that footprint and often solve the Wi-Fi issues that customers may face before they even face them, increasing customer satisfaction. Of course, if they do become or find that they have an issue, they can also call those support agents, and they have all the information that they need to answer those queries effectively and efficiently. As a byproduct, if you like, all that data can now be provided to the marketing teams, so they have a great understanding now of what the pain points of their customers are, and therefore they can create much more effective marketing campaigns and much more successful marketing campaigns around those customer pain points. And thirdly, and perhaps most interestingly, as those platforms increasingly move into open frameworks and open APIs, third-party developers can create new applications and features that can be now quickly and efficiently delivered into the home. Yes, around Wi-Fi management, but also increasing now new types of service applications such as IoT cybersecurity, much more advanced parental controls, and new smart home use cases. So the rise of the smart Wi-Fi platform is really starting to flip over, if you like, those KPIs that we talked about before. We've done a number of case studies around this, and what we've seen is as service providers move from this lack of investment to active investment, specifically around these smart Wi-Fi platforms, we've seen installation-based calls reduced by up to 60%, general support calls being reduced by 30%, and even engineering visits also been reduced by 30%. So a significant reduction in operational costs of that business. But also, because you're now providing a much better experience to those customers, we've also seen net promoter scores increasing by 10 to 40 points, and even increased revenues through an increased number of premium customers, moving from what was traditionally around the 20 to 25% mark up to the 30 and even 45% mark in some cases. So not only does this software drive greater operational efficiencies, but it drives greater customer satisfaction and also opens up new revenue opportunities. So the use of AI data analytics in the cloud really does start to transform the broadband business. I've been in this business quite a long time, and people always talked about the threat of these becoming just dumb pipe providers. And I think with the introduction of AI data analytics into the mix, I would say that broadband is anything but dumb these days, really. And it can be used in various ways. Just obviously, we talked about the optimizing the experience for the customer, which leads onto the operational efficiency. And those two things alone, certainly in our research, usually justifies the business case of deployment. But also, because you now have this data and can use this data in a more dynamic way, you can start to change your business model. You can start to offer new types of services, perhaps using things like service guarantees, perhaps at a top level, but perhaps even down to an application level. So perhaps you can start to launch new services around cloud gaming, for example, with a guaranteed level of service around that particular application. The service teams have now this in-depth understanding of customer pain points, so the marketing and the R&D teams can now start to innovate and create, working with those third-party developers around new applications and features and services that those customers are interested in. And it leads to much more effective and even targeted marketing, which leads to much more higher penetration and click-through rates of those marketing initiatives. And then the circle just continues round and round, so really starting to evolve the broadband business into a much smarter one. So just to summarize, the deployment of data analytics really helps reduce operational costs, but also create new business opportunities. But if operators are to really take advantage of this, they must make sure that they evolve to a standard and open-based platforms. If they're going to build a sort of scale that's going to make them competitive against other kind of tech vendors that are also looking to move into this space. I think gone are the days where service providers will work very tightly with just a small number of partners to create one or two services per year. What operators now need to move to is a world where they have multiple different types of applications and features that will appeal to different types of customers, and they can turn these applications on or off at will, really. And that really does require a move to an open type platform. But also I would stress that they must look to maintain that consumer trust. Service providers are often talking about trust in their brands being a differentiator, but they're really starting to move into a world now where they basically know everything about their customers, and they're increasingly moving to working with third-party vendors, and so they need to be careful that that customer data just doesn't get out of control, and the customers start to lose trust in how they're managing that. So innovating around maintaining, if not even building on that consumer trust, is pivotal to their success. And with that, I will hand back to Lowry. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for sharing your compelling research in the space. Before moving to the next session, we have a few questions we'd like to ask that we think our customers would be interested in. First, can you expand on the changing role of the service provider in the home network and how this also converges with the service provider's attitude toward the smart home and their view and the value they place on the CPE device or the home gateway today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Isaac. It's a great question. Traditionally, the connected home part of the business, i.e. the broadband part and the smart home part, were very separate. So the broadband strategy was all about just providing connectivity, and they'd have a smart home team that was focused on smart home use cases. And that smart home team was very much focused on creating a proprietary type in-house built platform with a small select number of partners within that ecosystem. And I think we all know that that type of model hasn't found that much success, other than a few examples in Asia, for example. So what we've seen is a shift really in strategy. One is in the smart home space, it's much more open now, much working with a range of third-party partners, and service providers really just looking for the value that they can bring to those partners. And at the center of that is the home gateway, because that really is their footprint in the home, and they've recognized how important that is to delivering these new services and applications. But of course, the key is that software layer that sits on top, because that's what allows those new applications and services to be delivered much more efficiently in the home than it ever was before. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Second, as the service providers look beyond providing just the high-speed internet connection, what are some of the value-added services that you think the telcos are planning to deliver to subscribers?
Yeah, the first one is definitely around security, and I mean it was before, but certainly since the COVID-19 pandemic, it definitely is now. And it's not so much moving away from home security, but especially around IoT cybersecurity. And I think what's interesting going forward is that those two worlds are starting to merge. So you might even start to see bundles of security starting to be launched. To kind of this idea that we'll protect your whole home from all types of threats. So that's definitely a big trend. I think there's also another one around just thinking of the connected home as a service, really, and helping consumers with that, because they recognize that these connected homes are becoming increasingly complex, and consumers really need help. And service providers are really looking at innovative type application services that will help that info, and they'll be able to charge for it. And then finally, we've seen the reemergence of those smart home use cases I mentioned, especially around e-health, again, off the back of COVID-19. So it's kind of an evolution, really, from the connected home into these smart home use cases over time.
Yeah. The last question I have is that One of the things you mentioned on the last slide that you shared, and you've talked about this in your other research, is the importance of the telcos taking ownership of data collection and their data analytics platform. And as you've worked with other broadband providers around the world, what are some of the priorities or main drivers that are pushing telcos in this direction?
Yes, certainly to start with, it was all around that adaptive Wi-Fi. It was trying to solve that Wi-Fi conundrum of how do we provide a better Wi-Fi experience without just shipping more and more devices into the home in a very inefficient manner. So that was really the early driver. What we've seen more recently is a real shift, largely because the marketing teams are very much involved in this now. They want to use this as a way of differentiating their services. So they're really starting to drive the rollout of that. And of course, then becomes the new services and applications that they want to start to deliver on top. And we're starting to see that come through now. So service providers really turning their focus into, what's next? What are the new applications and services that we can now deliver? So it's that evolution really from just adaptive Wi-Fi to what I call smart Wi-Fi and smart home.
Yeah, great. Well, that's just a precursor to the later Q&A session. For those of you that are still listening, at the end of the session, you'll have the chance to ask some additional questions of Michael and the rest of the AWS team. So thank you very much, Michael. Next, we'll move into the second half of the session today, where we will go over what AWS calls the Broadband Freedom Initiative. So as we've collaborated with service providers over the years, we've identified 3 areas where service providers can add value to their existing CPE platforms as they look at integrating with the cloud. And these include, first, improving and modernizing their data collection and analytics platform. Second, enhancing the way that they are currently managing their CPE device fleets and fixing any pain points or filling any gaps. And third, with an eye toward the next generation CPE, how to add those value-added services that complement what they are currently offering their subscribers today. To help service providers confront the various challenges they are grappling with today, AWS is now introducing what we call the Broadband Freedom Initiative. And at the core of this initiative is helping service providers modernize their data collection capabilities, liberating and unlocking data that has been difficult to get access to, or speeding up the frequency of access to the telemetry data in order to open up new predictive diagnostic use cases, as an example. Broadband Freedom is comprised of 2 parts. First, it is a methodology based on best practices for helping service providers integrate and augment their existing CPE management systems with the AWS cloud. And second, it is a pro-serve offering that helps service providers accelerate their integration projects, which includes a Broadband Freedom workshop, architecture blueprints, starter code, and other integrations that can help accelerate the work that service providers are doing. And we'll share a little bit more about that later in the session today. Service providers are choosing to integrate and modernize their CPE systems with the cloud for various reasons. Some of the things that we would like to highlight here are, first, the cloud provides the ability to scale from 1 million to millions of connected devices effortlessly. Second, new data collection efforts are focused on near real-time telemetry gathering, and the cloud can enable this at whichever frequency required by service provider business and technology requirements. And last, and somewhat more importantly, it's the cloud that opens up a range of opportunities related to AI and ML services. And service providers recognize that AWS provides a wealth of services related to harnessing all of the goodness of AI and ML and being able to apply those services to the data that you're gathering from those CPE devices in order to make those predictive diagnostic and other decisions to enhance your current CPE management systems. The Broadband Freedom Initiative applies to all of the traditional service provider CPE types, and this includes remote gateways, set-top boxes, hubs, Wi-Fi mesh extenders, etc. Additionally, more and more service providers are offering new products and devices beyond the traditional CPE, and Broadband Freedom can help manage those devices as well. This includes security cameras, environmental sensors, smart home automation devices, etc. As we've worked with service providers, we've observed that the CPE modernization journey typically starts with modernizing data collection and improving the data analytics platform. Next, enhancing device management, which is usually filling gaps or smoothing some pain points that the current CPE management system does not provide. And last, it's building the next generation CPE, and that especially includes the integrations with the AI and ML services, both on the CPE device and with those services that are available in the cloud. With that, we will dive into some of the technical aspects of the Broadband Freedom offering, and Dave Malone will talk about the reference architectures and share some of the customer stories. Dave, over to you.
All right, thank you, Laurie. We're going to go through some of the Broadband Freedom reference architectures and a few of our customer stories, as we have had a few customers take advantage of these reference architectures to begin unlocking the value of their data using AWS services. This high-level simplified view outlines the three common approaches to CPE modernization. First, customers can easily open a data path from CPE devices into the AWS cloud using existing CPE data models, and most importantly, in many cases, they can do so without making any firmware updates to the CPE device. This is really a simple way to get started with results that can have immediate impact for their business. Second, service providers recognize the advantage of incorporating MQTT capabilities into their CPEs in order to enhance their CPE device management systems. And third, they can take advantage of AWS services to begin to develop capabilities for the next generation CPE. This first architecture refers to that first scenario where customers want to begin taking advantage of the data that they can obtain from their existing CPEs without making any firmware changes from the CPEs themselves. In this case, what we're going to enable is customers, without making firmware changes onto the CPEs themselves, the ability to ingest TR-181 and 232 data sets, for instance, into AWS IoT Core, and to begin building out a data lake for a core data analytics platform. From here, they can begin to build high-level applications on top of that data, including heartbeat applications and predictive hardware diagnostic applications, and so on. Customers can also take advantage of the AWS analytics services to visualize incoming CPE data in near real time. They can also take advantage of AWS ML and AI services to build other value-added services to do things, again, like predictive hardware diagnostics. In this reference architecture, we're demonstrating how, if the MQTT functionality can be added into CPEs, customers can begin to take advantage of other AWS services for enhanced device management functionality. With an MQTT client on the CPE and secure provisioning of the device, CPEs can communicate securely to AWS, really allowing them to take advantage of device management capabilities that AWS has designed as part of the AWS IoT Core and related services. Companies really have used this to improve firmware updates, create visual dashboards, and modernize speed test applications as just a few examples. Finally, in this slide, many of AWS customers are taking advantage of the fact that AWS IoT services and cloud services can be used to create modular applications, both on the CPE and in the cloud, allowing them to move more quickly and innovate more quickly on their customers' behalves. Using AWS IoT Greengrass on the CPE itself, CPE developers can create modular applications that do not require a complete CPE device firmware reflash. These components can be comprised of AWS Lambda, Docker containers, or machine learning models that are built and managed in the cloud securely and pushed at scale across your fleet of CPEs using these enhanced device management capabilities discussed in the previous architecture. Finally, bringing these three architectural aspects together, you can see how AWS enables the future innovation that CPE customers are looking for in the future. In the next few slides, we'll show examples of customers that have benefited from integrating AWS services with their CPE device management platforms. Starting with a modernized or improved data analytics platform, this is a customer that wanted to get near real-time insights into their fleet of 15 million plus remote gateway devices. We collaborated with them to build a simple mechanism for sending TR69 messages to the cloud, and then an application that tracks when devices go offline. This has improved the customer experience as the service provider customer care teams are aware of problems before customer support calls arise, and they can proactively take action to help the customer initiate a resolution. This reference architecture is what was designed to help that previously mentioned customer accommodate the 15 million CPE devices to ingest their data at scale using AWS managed services, building a data lake to help them quickly visualize and generate alerts based on the operational status of their CPE fleet. British Telecom is one of the world's leading communication services companies. BT serves the needs of customers in the UK and in 180 countries worldwide. BT's main activities are the provision of fixed line services, broadband, mobile, and TV products and services, as well as networked IT services. BT customers have a slow and unreliable experience when requesting home broadband speed tests. The current solution became even less reliable with the increase in the number of customers and did not scale to meet BT's needs. BT desired to use AWS IoT services to improve customer experience when requesting a broadband speed test. AWS Professional Services delivered a platform leveraging AWS IoT Core, provisioning of CPE devices, and triggering speed tests via MQTT command and control. They then helped build and design microservices to enable real-time streaming of speed test results to client applications. They integrated this with BT's internal business and operations support systems, thereby improving monitoring and operation of speed test solutions. To date, BT has onboarded around 2.8 million Smart Hub devices, with a goal to onboard up to 4 million devices by the end of the year to this AWS platform. BT's vision for next-generation routers is to break free from legacy constraints and offer an improved and real-time management, monitoring, upgrade, and control capability out of the box. In this endeavor, BT wanted to leverage USB standard and MQTT in combination with the AWS cloud and serverless services for a highly scalable, agile, and data-driven solution. And this is the reference architecture that shows how easy it is to add device management capability to the CPE devices for secure communication with the AWS cloud. Another AWS customer case study is Centrica Hive. Centrica Hive is a great example of using AWS services to build the next generation CPE devices. Centrica Hive has a home hub device that integrates with other sensors and devices in the home. This has been deployed and is managing 1 million plus devices using the AWS IoT services and Greengrass for application management and modular application deployments. As a result, Hive was able to significantly lower their costs and decommission hundreds of servers. All right, at this point, I will hand things over to Alina Dima from AWS Professional Services to discuss how you can get started with the Broadband Freedom Initiative at AWS.
Thank you very much, David. I am from Professional Services, and I will be talking to you today about the Broadband Freedom Initiative created by Professional Services at AWS. Based on our learnings with the customers in the telco industry and combined with the deep expertise that we have in professional services in building highly scalable, available, reliable, and well-architected AWS-based cloud solutions, in professional services, we have created a broadband freedom offering that is focused on supporting our customers in accelerating the cloud journey in order to unlock new business value from their CPE devices. In the next few slides, I'm going to introduce this offering. Then I'm going to talk about the features of the offering itself, as well as the phases approach that we are suggesting in professional services. And I will conclude by presenting two architectures that we have built that we consider blueprints for the Broadband Freedom Initiative. So let's get started. This slide is going to introduce the ProServe Broadband Freedom offering. The scope of this offering is to propose a collaborative engagement with our customers in order to design, discover, and implement an end-to-end pilot solution. This solution is going to be focused on unlocking CPE data, performing the data collection, getting insights into the CPE data, as well as features oriented towards fleet and device management and allowing for further innovation. This offering is catered around existing CPE devices as well as next generation. So the outcome would be a common AWS-based platform that would connect older generation as well as next generation. So potentially both TR69 and USB, but of course not only. This solution would scale to millions of devices using AWS serverless technology. What this would enable our customers to do is gradually evolve without suddenly needing to replace their device management solution. So it will be starting off with coexistence and then focusing on a strategy of building new features on top of AWS services. So we would have multiple phases of this offering, and I will talk in the next slides about that. In terms of the key activities and how professional services generally works with customers, we initially start off by assessing the customer business goals and their use cases. So this will be done in a workshop. Then we are selecting a use case, and we are working together with the customer and the customer teams on architecting the project and implementing the pilot. And then we're documenting, of course, the solution architecture, the system design, and we're preparing the deliverables, so the code for handoff to the customer. As part of the professional engagement, professional services engagement for Broadband Freedom, the customer will, of course, be presented and will be part of. We will work together with the customer on creating a roadmap, and this roadmap will include the next steps. In terms of the outcome of the ProServe offering for Broadband Freedom, what we would like to achieve is, like I said earlier, a common platform for all CPE devices. We want to gain access in real time and actionable access into the data from the CPE devices in order to improve the operations, to improve the quality of experience, and also to enable future innovation. Additionally, we want a scalable and secure device management platform. The features of the broadband freedom offering. So in terms of features, what we provide with this solution, and like I said, this is based on the experience that we have had with professional services customers. It is architectures and code accelerators and blueprints you will see in the next slides for various CPE use cases and which are catered towards various business outcomes. All the architectures that we have are based on AWS best practices in security, in creating cloud-native applications. It is all based on the well-architected framework, and also the experience that we have built working with customers in the telco industry. This offering is working similarly to how other offerings from professional services work. So the customer will own the solution in the end. We work together with the customer team to accelerate the onboarding onto the AWS cloud. And also we are focused, very focused on working backwards from the customers towards achieving the desired business outcomes. Now let me mention to you what we have as major features. So because this offering is really meant as an accelerator, the first thing that we need to do is onboard the devices, the CPE devices, onto the AWS IoT platform. And this is where we have not only architectural blueprints for TR69 devices as well as USB devices, but we also have starter code. And of course, the starter code is built on solutions that we have taken to production together with our customers, like in the example of British Telecom mentioned earlier by David. Additionally, we also have, for the newer protocol for USB, we have a cloud-based USB controller blueprint, architecture again, and starter code for customers who already want to focus on the new protocols. We also provide blueprints for integration with the ACS APIs where this is necessary, as well as integration with customer external or internal systems. We provide blueprints for data ingestion. In case we're talking about USB, we are providing encoders and decoders for the USB data from protobuf into JSON, from JSON into protobuf for command and control, as well as real-time streaming APIs based on GraphQL, similar to what we have built earlier in the case of speed test for British Telecom. We also provide dashboard examples, wireframes, as well as proof of concept and further development, further extensible dashboards that could demonstrate certain use cases. All these features are customizable through partnerships with you, our customers, so we can, of course, augment these existing features to cater for your needs. The phases of broadband freedom, and this is actually quite interesting because here we're talking, we are not going to do everything in one phase, let's say a big bang migration from the existing device management solutions into something new that is AWS based. So we're going to take a phased approach, and we will start with an assessment. This assessment is generally a broadband freedom discovery workshop. And here we will sit together with the key stakeholders of the customers. We will review the use cases. We will focus on discovering the existing platform, understanding how we can integrate with the existing platform and how much we need to integrate, reviewing the starting state as well as the target state, defining the desired customer outcomes so that we know what we need to work backwards from, and creating a roadmap, identifying the risks, identifying the assumptions, and the end result of this assessment phase needs to be a use case definition, as well as a business readiness that we need to assess. And of course, we need to identify the skill metrics and the teams from the customer and from AWS that will need to be involved. After we have identified and the use cases, and based on what the starting point is, then we will start with the actual design and build phases. So if we identify, for example, that the customer is in the MVP, broadband freedom MVP phase, then we will focus on onboarding the customer's devices, doing the provisioning with AWS, and enabling the data analytics use cases. And here we are talking about sending device data model, parameters from device data models into AWS IoT, enabling further insights and building analytics and visualizations. So here it is all about CPE provisioning with AWS, data ingestion pipelines, building data lakes, and enabling analytics and visualizations, as well as potential possibility for command and control via MQTT, like the example of triggering a speed test. So this is all just to prove the value of unlocking the data, so giving real-time insights for improved quality of experience. The next step would be around modernization, and here we are talking about enhanced device management, performing, for example, smarter over-the-air upgrades to the devices, doing complex fleet management, security anomaly detection, predicting outages and mitigating outages, as well as other services. So this will have as an aim driving operational efficiency and increasing the time to market. The last phase is around innovation and next generation of devices. And here we're talking about really building new services, improving value-added services, and creating modern applications that run on a modern platform. And here examples would be AI and ML integration with the CPE devices, predictive hardware diagnosis, as well as other applications to unlock new services and business models. Like I said, based on where in the journey the customer is at the time of the workshop finding himself in, we adapt the use cases that we deal with, and we build based on the customer's desired outcomes and current situation. About the Broadband Freedom Discovery and Design Workshop. This is the assessment workshop that I have talked about earlier. And the main scope of this is to introduce AWS capabilities and to introduce especially AWS IoT and serverless technology. And here we have usually 2 IoT resources who run this workshop, 2 IoT consultants from professional services, who perform 3 to 4 deep dive remote sessions, and at the end work with the customer on a proposal for the next steps. We try to understand when we meet with the customers, we try to understand their existing business. We try to see what the current situation is, what the pain points are, what the objectives and the goals of applying broadband freedom would be for them. After we develop a clear understanding of the technology, of the architecture, of the protocols, and of the integration points for the broadband freedom solution, we align on a plan which will help us achieve their vision. And this last step is really about timelines, about a proposed architecture, technology choices, required skill set, and a project scope. So this workshop usually happens, of course, at the beginning of the engagement with professional services. Now, in the last 2 slides, what I will do is give you 2 examples of architectures that we have built. And one of them, the one that you see in front of you at the moment, is already on production for over 2 million CPE devices. Here, what we have done is integrated TR69 devices with AWS IoT. So, like I said, this is a production deployed architecture. And here the CPE devices are leveraging an already existing communication with the ACS server that is actually trusted and secure in order to provide devices with unique device identities that they can later on leverage to connect to AWS IoT in order to perform MQTT-based operations. So what you see here is a device communicating via the API gateway. So it is an HTTPS endpoint with AWS in order to provision. Behind the scenes, we have a decoupled mechanism of processing the provisioning requests via Amazon SQS through a Lambda function into AWS IoT Core, where we create the certificate and the key. And later on, we call the REST APIs of ACS backend servers in order to trigger remote procedure calls onto the device to set the certificate and key as parameters. So this is an example of a scalable architecture that we have built with our customers and is working at the moment on production. The next example I would like to talk about is CPE onboarding and ingestion with USP. So this is more catered for newer devices, so for next generation devices. And what this architecture shows is how a USB agent, and for the scope of this proof of concept, we have used a further enhanced version of the open source USB agent provided by the Broadband forum. So what we're doing is configuring this agent to communicate with AWS IoT. So we're configuring the MQTT MTP for AWS IoT with the AWS IoT core endpoint and enabling the device with the USB agent on it to ingest data into AWS IoT. And we are streaming this data via a GraphQL API, so via AppSync onto different dashboards. At the same time, the command and control works similarly. We can control the CPE device from a dashboard via AppSync by sending commands onto MQTT topics all the way back to the device. The interesting aspect of this solution is that the data that gets sent from the USB agent is encoded in protobuf. So it arrives on the cloud side, and we have decoder functions that are called in order to turn the data into JSON and further process it and stream it onto the front ends. If you would like to know more about this solution, you can watch the presentation that we had this year at reInvent about USP and building an AWS cloud controller using USP. Thank you very much for your attention. This is all from my side, and I will hand it back to Laurie to do the summary and open the Q&A session.
Thank you, Dave and Alina, for all the great content you just shared. In summary, AWS services are available to help service providers modernize their CPE management systems, especially data collection and analytics, and a cloud-native approach to application building. AWS has also launched an initiative called Broadband Freedom to help accelerate these modernization and innovation efforts, especially the integrations with our AI ML services. And last, we have a ProServe offering to help you accelerate projects that are related to your CPE management systems. So for those of you that are listening today and interested in getting started with the Broadband Freedom Initiative, it's a simple process of requesting a meeting with your AWS account team or sending an email to the email address on this slide, and we'll contact you shortly. And we're happy to present the details of the Broadband Freedom Initiative and how we can help accelerate your project in this area. And with that, thank you very much for those of you that are participating today. And with the remaining time, we'll open it up for any questions that you have.